Okay, Ann here, and I have a new little watercolor palette, or mid-sized watercolor palette, that I am wanting to fill. So as you can see, I have my great big watercolor palette, which I have actually watercolors and some gouache and some Neocolor too, which I've shavings that I have put in here. And then I also have little tiny watercolor palettes. But I want something a little more in between, so enough to hold some of my favorites, but yet not be quite as bulky, a little easier to take with me out and about, or even to a different room than the large one. So that's what I'm looking at today. I have this new palette that I just got from Meeden, and it holds 24 half pans in here, but I also have, as you can see, a couple full pans that I'm filling. I have a full pan of a White Knight's mountain broom that was gifted to me, and so I want to include it because it's a new favorite. I also have a half pan of, or a full pan rather, of my favorite Tundra Violet by Schminke. I really love both of those. One is a more cool neutrals, and the other's a more warm. They're both very granulating, very interesting looking, and kind of my go-to favorites that I use a lot. So I don't mind having a full pan of each of those. But then from there, I'm going to choose some of my most used colors. I'll be doing a little bit of rearranging, but so far I have in there actually a white gouache by Holbein and a Daniel Smith Buff Titanium watercolor, and let's see, I believe that's the Bork's Parrot Pink, also by Holbein, that I have in there, and I believe maybe a red that I'm looking at there, Holbein Gouache Flame Red. I don't have a good red watercolor that I'm super happy with, so I've had to go to my gouache collection for some of those. Right now, I'm thinking, okay, I really do want maybe a lunar black. This would be the place to put those, so I'm kind of doing a little bit of rearranging. I really like lunar black because it granulates, and I don't very often use it by itself, but I do like mixing it, like mixed with the yellow. It makes a really lovely green. I like to mix it with a blue to make kind of like a Payne's Gray type color. So I do use it a lot as a good mixing color. So I want to include it as well. But there's so many great colors out there that it is really hard for me to narrow them down. This sounds like a lot of color choices in here. Actually, I only have 22 instead of 24 because of having those full pans in there. So I got to make my choices carefully. So I'm choosing some browns, some warm tones, some earthy tones, and I have sorted out several tubes that of paints I know I like that are in the running, and I'm just putting a little swatch of them here in my sketchbook. I'm laying the tube beside it so I can keep track of what's what, and then I'm just going to swatch these out and see what I have and make my choice from there. You can see that these are all very beautiful colors. However, some of them are quite similar, quite close to each other, and so that will help me narrow down some, because I do not need to be duplicating colors. I need to have a variety. I'm doing the same thing with my reds and oranges and pinks. Tried to decide which of these I want to include. I'm putting a little star there by ones that I think are kind of a sure thing. And fill in my little half pans from there. So as you can see, I have one row already filled up. So just double checking here that these are what I want. Orange is a color that I really like to use and I'm a little bit picky about, so I'm kind of taking some extra care here with really deciding which orange I want to include in my palette. Now that I have my warm colors pretty figured out, I'm going to move over to my cool colors and swatching those out on a facing page kind of helps to see them in contrast to each other. And I know the greens are really important to me, so I'm kind of picking some of those early on. I've recently acquired a couple new greens that I am kind of excited about. One is Holbein's Hazy Moon Yellow, which doesn't seem yellow at all. It's a very dark green. And then also Van Gogh's Dusk Yellow, which granulates beautifully. That's the one I'm putting down right now. It is a really pretty granulating color. I don't know if you'll be able to really see it here. And then Daniel Smith's Serpentine Green is also a granulating color. If you can't tell by now, I really am drawn to granulation. But this has been a kind of a go-to color. I've replaced this tube a time or two, and I use it quite a lot. So it's a faithful color. And then also Undersea Green is another one that I go to. However, there's some other ones like Daniel Smith's Green Appetite or Forest Olive by Schminke, which is the one that I just put down. And some of those you can see there's a lot of kind of olivey greens, so I'm going to have to be a little bit selective about which of those that I pick. Then we come to the blues, and I am having a hard time narrowing these down. There is such a variety. They aren't all the same. So actually my greens were a little more similar. I had more that were similar to each other than I do the blues. So I'm going to have to really be choosy. I really love indigo. That is a favorite. But I also like the granulation of the tundra blue. The cerulean blue is a real favorite. The Holbein Davies gray, you probably don't really call that a blue, but it's like a real stormy gray blue color. And then the cobalt teal, of course, is a favorite, and I especially love it when you're mixing it with opera pink to make a really lovely purple, which I have not included in the purple in this palette. And of course, ultramarine, I don't use it often by itself, but I do really like it for mixing. And I recently became a lover of the Prussian blue. And then, of course, phthalo turquoise is so intense that it's a real plus. So I'm going to have a challenge here of narrowing these blues down. So while I only allowed myself 3 different greens, I have left slots for 5 blues, and I'm still having trouble figuring out which 5 those will be. So one that I've already stuck over there in the pan is Horizon Blue, and it's just a lovely, I think it might be a gouache. It's a little more opaque. I do love it for a sky blue. It was a color that was gifted to me, so I'm not entirely sure where it came from. It is Horizon Blue though, and so now that leaves me just 4 more blues to choose. So I've made my selection. I started to say final selection, but who am I fooling? This will evolve and change over time as I discover new favorites or need to tweak and adjust this a little bit. But that's part of the fun of the whole thing. But this is it for now. And I'm going to go ahead and swatch these out so I can show you the colors that I have picked. And I will label those here in a bit, and so that you can actually freeze the screen and get all the colors if you so choose. But so far I have on the left Tundra Violet by Schminke. I have White Nights Mountain Broom. I have Daniel Smith Lunar Black. I have the Holbein White Gouache, which I inadvertently mixed a little of the buff titanium in, which is the next to it. I have a Daniel Smith Shell Pink, which just is a lovely peachy pink color. I have Holbein's Bork's Parrot Pink, and then Hydrogen Red, which is kind of a almost neon type color, which is by Stone Ground. I believe it's Canadian. I got it in a little shop in northern Minnesota. So that's left to right on the top row. Moving down to the second row, on the right hand side, I'm using Flame Red Gouache by Holbein because, as I said, I do not have a watercolor red that I'm very happy with. So I just put some gouache in there. I use those pretty interchangeably anyway, so that'll work for me. And then next to that, I have the Holbein Cadmium Red Orange. I have Holbein Permanent Yellow Deep, plus it's mixed with a Core Quin Gold. So I didn't have it quite the color that I wanted, and so I thought that the permanent yellow was a little too close to the Hansa yellow, as you can see here. So I ended up mixing in some of the Core Quin Gold with that color. So the yellow is Daniel Smith Hansa yellow. And then to the left of that is Daniel Smith Goethite, which is a lovely granulating color. To the left of that, I have Daniel Smith Pompeii Red. And then Daniel Smith Piemontite Genuine. Really pretty kind of burgundy color. And then finally, on the far left of the second row, I have the Van Gogh Dusk Yellow, which is one of the 3 greens that I picked. Mainly made the cut because it granulates so beautifully. Then on the bottom row, left to right, I have Daniel Smith's Serpentine Green, which is a bright and cherry green, and then Daniel Smith's Undersea Green, which is a more foresty green. And then moving to the blues, I chose Daniel Smith Ultramarine Blue, Daniel Smith Cerulean, Schminke Tundra Blue, Coors Indigo, and then that Horizon Blue that was in the gifted pan. And that is the colors in my palette for now. The next thing I want to do is do a little bit of mixing. So I'm putting a color on the left and on the right, and then those two mixed together will be in the center. So just kind of doing a little testing and see how these colors behave with each other, what kind of mixes I can get, and just helps me know how to use my palette. So here I have that Hansa yellow, and I'm mixing that with the Lunar Black, and you can see what a pretty granulating green that makes. So moving on with that and having fun just with my little refined palette here. The advantage of changing up my palette from time to time is not only do I sometimes get bored with the same colors, and just rearranging them can help me like branch out and use them a little bit differently. So that's helpful. It gives other colors a chance to shine that get kind of overlooked other times. It really helps me evaluate what colors are my favorite, how they work together. I am kind of renewed in my mixing, I guess, abilities as far as choosing what I can mix together to achieve what I'm after. So there's all kinds of benefits for me of just creating, setting up, and changing up my palettes from time to time. Of course, the true test of a watercolor palette is whether I can paint a picture with it. So I chose this kind of little overgrown nature scene here and have used my new watercolor palette. Right now I'm also using some Neocolor 2 in there. Most of my work is mixed media, so it makes sense even as I try out my watercolor palette to bring some other media into the mix. And so far for this foliage piece, the colors are working out well. I've got some sky blue. I've got some good enough variety of greens here. I brought in some of those oranges I was talking about that I like to use. And using my Neocolor 2 for accents here and there within that. So here's my finished piece, my finished palette, and all my beautiful paint colors. Thanks for watching. See you next time.